Welcome to Grow Virtually, an online horticultural educational program presented by the Master Gardener Volunteers of Cobb County under the guidance of the University of Georgia Cooperative Extension Service. We grow gardeners.
Now I'd like to welcome our speaker, Master Gardener Natalie Ellington, and our panelists, Becky Blades and Linda Petkus.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Natalie Ellington, and with me today are fellow Master Gardeners Linda Petkus and Becky Blades. We will show you how plant propagation allows you to increase your plant collection while stretching your plant buying budget. We will also answer some questions on this featured topic. Just type them in the Q&A, which has already been mentioned, in the Q&A box, which is found on the Zoom menu bar on your screen, and we will do our best to answer them. So let's begin our presentation. We will start with the basics. Plant propagation is the creation of new plants from existing ones. Typically, plants fall into two propagation groups. First, seeds, also called sexual propagation, and second, by inducing root formation from existing plants, which is called asexual propagation. This method assures an exact replica of the mother plant. However, there are some benefits to starting from seeds. It's the least expensive way to grow your desired plant, and it usually is a lot faster to grow from seeds than from cuttings, and it is the only way to get new variety of plants. Some plants can only reproduce from seeds. When propagating from seeds, it's very important to have good quality seeds from a reliable dealer or source because it guarantees that you are getting the particular cultivar or variety of plant you desire, and your seeds do not contain contaminants such as weed seeds, insect casings, and soil particles. If you purchase your seeds, all seed packets come with key instructions about how and when to sow the seeds, germination and planting care information, days to maturity, and dates of seed viability. Look for seeds packed for the current season. You can also choose to collect your own seeds by extracting them from a flower pod or inside fruits or vegetables, such as you see on the screen here. There are two main types of seeds, dry or wet. Dry seeds develop inside a husk or a fruit pod. For example, beans, okra, peppers, onions, and herbs such as dill produce dry seeds. Wet seeds are produced from fleshy fruits such as tomatoes, eggplant, and squash. To harvest the wet seeds, you have to break open the fleshy fruit and extract the seeds from the fruit. The seeds must be completely clean, so spread them out on a dry surface for several days before storing them. For both dry and wet seeds, they must be completely dry before you store them. You may want to save seeds from your garden plants. These seeds are the result of random pollination and will most likely not produce plants identical to the parents, particularly with hybrid varieties. Be sure that seeds collected from the garden are mature and totally dry before storing. Storing seeds with extra plant pulp or plant material that is not completely dry may mold and deteriorate while in storage. Collected seeds usually have a 65 to 80% germination rate, and about 3/4 of these seedlings should produce satisfactory plants. Again, to properly store your seeds, keep them in a dry, cool place, which will extend their life. However, the longer you store seeds, the more their germination rate decreases. We recommend storing seeds in paper, labeling, and keeping them in the refrigerator or other cool, dry place until you're ready to use them. Germination is the process of a seed developing into a plant. It starts with the absorption of water. Germination is heavily influenced by 4 environmental factors. Water is critical for the first step in germination. Without water, the seed will remain dormant. The right amount of water is critical. Too much water causes the seeds to rot, and too little water causes embryos to die. Adequate continuous moisture is essential to germination. Linda will be demonstrating this in our first video. Oxygen, viable seeds actively breathe, releasing carbon dioxide and consuming oxygen. As germination proceeds, respiration increases and more oxygen is needed. Seed starting media needs to drain well to meet this need for oxygen. If it is too heavy or too wet, the seeds will not have the oxygen they require, and germination may be greatly slowed or stopped altogether. Third, light. Some seeds require light to germinate, while others require darkness. Some seeds have no preference at all. Look at catalogs and seed packets for specific information about light requirements for your seeds. If a seed requires light for germination, sow the seed on the soil surface. If the seed requires darkness, cover it lightly with a layer of fine peat moss or vermiculite. And finally, temperature. Temperature affects the number of seeds that germinate, as well as how fast the seeds germinate. Seed packets and catalogs generally list the optimum temperature for germination. A good rule of thumb is 65 to 75 degrees Fahrenheit. After germination, the temperature should be gradually lowered to 65 degrees Fahrenheit. But remember, read the seed packet label. These can be sown directly into the container or space where they will grow, or they can be transplanted to another container or space to finish growing later. Most seeds are planted at a depth approximately twice their diameter. Very small seeds should be simply pressed gently into the surface of the soil and barely covered. To raise the humidity for the germinating seed, the container can be covered with plastic wrap or placed into a plastic bag, but remove the bag as soon as the germination occurs. Not all plants respond well to transplanting, and for some crops such as beans, transplanting does not offer benefits enough to pursue. Most large seeded plants such as corn and pumpkin and root crops such as carrots and beets are best sown directly. Sow seeds directly into the container or placed in the ground where they will grow, following the recommended seeding depth on the packet. Gardeners generally sow more seeds than are desired as a precaution to ensure that the right number of plants are ultimately grown, especially with tiny seeds such as pansies or carrots. Lots of seeds can end up in a small space, and the seedlings need to be thinned, leaving the remaining plants with enough space between them to grow and develop properly. Weak or unwanted seedlings can be snipped off with scissors or pinched off at the soil level. So if you have grown your own or purchased seedlings, transplanting seedlings require the proper spacing so the plant is not competing for water, light, and nutrients with the neighboring plants. The spacing information can often be found on the seed packet or plant label as well. So here are some examples of plants that transplant well from seedlings. And I'm sure as you look at this list, you recognize some things, some plants that you have purchased, and they hopefully have done well for you. And here are some examples of seeds that should be sown directly into the soil at the proper time. Again, as gardeners, I'm sure you are familiar with these, and hopefully they too have done well for you. So once your seedlings are off to a great start, they must be hardened off. Hardening off is the process of acclimating the seedlings or young plants to living under drier, harsher conditions, like an outdoor garden setting. Seedlings sown indoors, even if they have been under grow lights and kept cool, will still need to acclimate to living outside before they are planted in the garden. One way to prepare plants is to move them outside to a shady location and then gradually increase the amount of sunlight over a period of several days. Alternatively, young tender plants can be brought outside on an overcast day, bringing the plants back inside after a few hours. Repeat daily, extending the length of time that plants remain outside by an hour until the plants have acclimated to the brighter, drier outside conditions. This transition can also be accomplished by reducing temperatures to between 45 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit and reducing water. The idea is to slow growth and thicken the plant cell walls. Start this process 1 to 2 weeks prior to planting seedlings in the garden. Take care to transition plants gradually, as extreme changes can slow growth to the point of the plant dying. As you can see, there are a number of items here on the screen. You will need to propagate seeds at home if you're going to propagate seeds at home, and you may want to take a picture of this slide for future reference. Now we will show a short video as Linda shows us how to prepare our materials for seed starting.
We're here at the home of Linda Petkus, who's one of our master gardeners, and we refer to her as the seed queen.
I earned that title over at the Center for Children and Young Adults.
Very good. So Linda, will you show us just how do you get started with
Sure.
growing your plants by using seeds?
Sure. To me, one of the important items is to have sterile starting for the seeds. So now these are used, but to clean pots, I fill a bucket here with a 10% solution of bleach, and I figured out about 1.25 cups of bleach in here, and then fill it up, and that's about right. That goes in the bucket. These guys go in. I mean, the water would be deeper when I'm doing it, but to sterilize these guys, and then I rinse them. You could have a second bucket to rinse them in just pure water, or depending on how many I'm doing, I just use the faucet. Okay, now step 2 is to fill them with soil. And I personally think using seed starting soil is important. I think it's because it's more sterile. But anyway, ever since I've been using it, I don't get damping off. So I pour. Okay, so I get some soil in my little tray here. I like to wet the soil before I stick them in the pots, because you know how deep the soil is going to be. It's messier on your hand, and I don't wear gloves. But I get the soil moist. And then I take one of my nice clean cell packs. I'm not sure I have enough soil for this little demonstration, but I fill it up. I use this. Oh, and by the way, the seed pack usually tells you how deep to plant the seeds. So I don't fill it all the way to the top. I leave a little space, and then later on we'll see planting. So this one only has 4 cells, but that's the idea.
Thank you, Linda. Like doing any project, success with seed starting is dependent upon preparation. Plants her seed.
So assuming that normally these would all be filled with dirt, but just for today we're doing 1 cell pack here. I put the seeds on this little piece of paper, and I'll show you how I get them into the cell. But some seed packets will say, this one says 30 seeds. So I put 1 seed in each cell because I need like 30 tomatoes, which is what this is. This other packet, which is onion, has probably got 200 in there. So that changes my mind in how many seeds I put in a cell. But for today, I'm just going to put 1 seed, or maybe 2, but this is how I do it. I take my little poker thing here, and I try to separate the seeds, so if they both germinate, it makes them easier to cut them out, thin. Yeah, so I take my little wand here. What is this thing called? So I put 2 seeds in each of these cells. Okay, 1 there, 1 there. Whoops, 2. And if you get more than you want, well, you can still thin them out. Okay, so now I need goodbye seeds. Now, this seed packet said these particular seeds need to be covered. So I now take dry soil. I have not pre-wetted this because it's easier to spread. And I'm just guessing whether it's 1/4 of an inch or 1/2 an inch, whatever the seed packet says. So you cover the seed, so they're going to be happy. But then I moisten them. So, whoops, come on, guy. So I moisten that soil so the seeds are moist underneath and also on top. Okay, that's enough. Oh, and then I put in a label. I take my little gardening pen here, and this was onion. And I planted them today, which is what, April 5th?
Yes.
So all the seeds in this cell pack are the same, so it gets 1 label. If I were planting multiple different kind of seeds in different cells, then I'd need more labels. But since all of the seeds in here are onions, it gets 1 label. And, oh, and then the next thing is, going back to the seed pack, this guy says germination best at 70 to 90 degrees Fahrenheit. So in case not all the seeds need to be that warm. I mean, they can be, in my case, room temperature in February. So, but I try to organize, and if I have multiple seeds that need a heating pad, they'll go on this shelf. I have a thermostat up there, which tells me how warm the heating mat is. Not all the seeds need to be heated. And I will tell you, one year when I first got the heating pads, I let the seeds germinate, and then I kept the soil hot, and I think I cooked them. I lost a lot of seedlings that year. So, and then, oh, I do keep track. That's kind of the last step. I keep a spreadsheet, that says what it is when I planted it. I label the tray, you know, tray 1 has this kind of tomato or that kind of tomato. I say how many seeds I planted, and I keep track of how many seeds germinated, when I thinned, when I fertilized, so I can keep track. I'm a nerd.
No, you're a gardener, a master gardener.
So I keep track.
Thank you, Linda. That is fabulous. Suppose you don't have any seeds. How do you propagate a plant when you don't have a seed? Suppose you are planning an event and you need lots of mini succulents for centerpieces in a few weeks and you have a very tight budget. What do? You can do vegetative propagation. Vegetative propagation is done by placing a plant part under conditions favorable for rooting so that a new and independent plant is created. The newly produced plant, in most cases, is genetically identical to the parent plant. This is also known as vegetative cloning. Vegetative propagation is advantageous for multiple reasons. First, a large plant can be obtained in a shorter period of time, and these plants will flower faster than seed propagated plants. Also, so very little parent plant tissue is needed to produce many plants. In cases of declining specimens or historic plants, plant lineage can be maintained by vegetatively propagating replicas that have the vigor of young plants. We are going to show you some of the ways you can do this at home. We know some real benefits of vegetative propagation. Did you know that vegetative propagation methods are often enhanced by the use of plant hormones? Like people, natural hormones occur in plants and are known to regulate various physiological processes. Synthetic rooting hormones are root-producing chemicals that stimulate root formation. Rooting hormones are available as powder or liquid formations with varying strengths of active ingredients for use with different plant tissues. Rooting hormones can be purchased at most garden supply stores. Plants may be vegetatively propagated in several ways. This depends as to whether or not the new young plant is complete, which means it has shoots and roots at the time it is separated from the parent plant. Methods such as dividing, layering, and separating produce new plants that have roots and shoots at the time they are separated from the parent plant. Other methods, such as cuttings, grafting, and budding, start with pieces of the parent plant. Their roots and shoots must be generated first before the new plant is self-sufficient. Not all plants will propagate vegetatively, and not all vegetative methods will work for all species. Let's look at the division method. With this method, whole plants are literally divided into multiple new plants that have both roots and shoots. This next video is a demonstration that shows you how. Hi, we're here today to demonstrate our first method of vegetative propagation, which is division. And I have here, and this particular technique and method is very, very simple, especially for perennials. And I have this beautiful bunch here of hostas. And I'm just going to expose their roots here. And all you need is a sharp tool, like a knife, kitchen knife, or a pocket knife, but you can also use something fancy like I have here. And just simply divide it. Cut through where you're taking a piece of a whole plant, dividing the roots, and so you can have another whole plant with the roots and the shoots. And then you have your soil here, your pot, or if you planted them in ground, you can actually do that. If not, you can just plant it right here in your pot. And there you have it. That's called division. When to divide, you may ask. A good general rule to follow is to divide early blooming species in the fall and late blooming species in the spring. Bulbs and culms are divided when dormant. The photo demonstrates or illustrates a circle of irises. You can see they have a bald spot in the middle. Ideally, these should have been divided earlier than now, but the green shows we need to wait until fall. An exception is primrose, which can be divided immediately after the flower fades in the spring before growth starts or early in the fall. Greenhouse and house plants can be divided in the spring when their new growth is about to begin. Cuttings. Preparing cuttings is a multi-step process. Depending on what part of the mother plant is removed, such as a leaf of some species, you can root the leaf in water or dip it in a rooting hormone to stimulate the formation of roots. Members of the rhododendron family, which includes azaleas, African violets, and lavender, do well from cuttings. Becky talks about how and why.
So here we are by Becky's herb garden, and she was telling me that she wasn't particularly happy about this big lavender plant over here. So she's remedying her situation through plant propagation. So Becky, tell us.
So I just cut off some of the old lavender that was healthy, stuck it in water. When it got roots, I put it in a pot, and it's stretching this way because the sun, the majority of the sun is in this direction to the west, and I want it to stay in the bed. So we'll start over with a new plant. Same thing with the rosemary. The rosemary plant is over here, and it's okay, but now I have a fresh one to go in. I might put it on the other side. Love the plants. Both of them I just rooted a sprig in some water, and as soon as I got some leaves, I put it in pots and then let it sit for about a year to get big enough to be outside.
Okay, the next method is layering. Some woody plants, such as those with arching branches that can be brought down in contact with the ground, are propagated by ground layering. When roots have formed on the portion of the stem covered with soil, the stem between the parent plant and the new plantlet is severed. The new plant is dug up and moved to another location or potted up into a container. Forsythias and blueberries are examples of woody plants that propagate easily by layering. Becky will now demonstrate.
Welcome to the jungle. I came out maybe 2 weeks ago to clean up this oak leaf hydrangea, and I found that the limbs, many of the limbs had layered down on their own. It's one of the things that many of our woody plants do, like forsythia and azaleas and rhododendrons, and almost every hydrangea. If the limb comes in contact with the soil and has enough moisture, it'll root. And this big old limb came across the top of this grill where there was a pile of leaves and made roots. And then this lower limb over here behind the wall did the same thing. When you go to tug on them, you can feel they have roots. And so you can come along and cut the parent limb off and leave it and let it establish itself with more roots and dig it in the fall. Or you can dig it up now and put it in your landscape or put it in a pot for a plant sale. Come to the Master Gardener plant sale. So I'm going to dig through this, and then I'll show you what comes up from the root. This is quite a large limb, so I'm hoping there'll be roots here. I've cleaned the leaf litter off the top of the branch and lifted the limb, and you can see how many roots the plant has made there. And this, of course, being on top of a wall is not a particularly moist area, but the plant wanted to live. We'll come along and cut it off and show you what we have in a minute. I cut the limb from the parent plant, and you can see how many roots we have. These can now be put into a pot or into the landscape, and you'll have a brand new shrub. This is a tree that likes to layer on its own. This is a Magnolia stellata, which is a Japanese deciduous magnolia. It blooms February, March, and it's just covered up with big white flowers before any leaves. These low branches, I can pull them over and encourage it to layer, and then next fall I'll have a plant we can dig up. We can show you how we make a wound on the part of the branch that's going to touch the soil and put it on some. I'm going to add some soil and some mulch here because I don't want to damage the roots of the trees when I dig it up. And put a brick on it, and then basically just leave it alone and let it make roots. So I think I'm going to scratch right here. Okay, right below the bark is a green cambium layer, and that is where the roots will form. So we're going to injure it just a little bit because that encourages the roots to come.
Let's see if we can get in there and show our folks at home.
Okay,
There we go.
got it?
Yep. So you want to scratch off the outer cambium or the brown layer.
The bark and the
Expose-
cambium's just below it.
Expose the.
The cambium layer is where the roots will form. There we go. That one down. Let's see if we can.
So simple as that.
All right,
Okay.
and this is holding it in place.
And now we wait.
And now we wait.
All right. So Becky, if the branch is laying relatively flat across the ground, then what do you do?
I'll put the brick on where I want the roots to form, and then prop it with another stick and tie it up a little bit.
And it'll grow more erect that way.
Yeah. Then it'll look more like a tree when we cut it off,
Right. Rather than ground cover.
rather than a ground cover. Absolutely right.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
A second type of layering is known as air layering because it occurs in the air. The camellia plant can be propagated by air layering. The stem section to be separated from the mother plant is placed inside of aluminum foil after it has been wounded or scratched, treated with rooting powder or liquid, and packed in moist moss. Its moisture and nutrient needs are supplied by the mother plant until the stem has rooted and the new plant can be severed from the mother plant. Grafting and budding are methods of plant propagation in which plants' parts are joined so that they grow as one plant. These techniques are used to propagate cultivars that do not produce satisfactory results when propagated from cuttings, layering, division, or other asexual methods. Many species of fruit and nut trees and woody plants are propagated by grafting and cutting and budding. Grafting and budding are preferred to planting seeds for a variety of plant trees because more than 99% of all seedling trees bear fruit inferior to that produced by the parent trees. The fruit of seedlings in the same species is the same, the fruit of the seedling is the same, but it is unlike that of the parent tree in flavor, color, the date of ripening, and many other features and characteristics. To obtain a true to type fruit tree, that is a clone of the parent tree, it is necessary to graft or bud onto the desired rootstock. If you wish to dig deeper, we have included a link and from the University of North Carolina Extension on this particular method, grafting and budding, in the chat box. We want your hard work to pay off when you are doing any kind of plant propagation. So here are some helpful practices for success. First, dip your tools in rubbing alcohol or a weak bleach solution like 10% when moving from one plant to another. Second, be careful when cuttings are shared with friends. Do not use cuttings from unhealthy plants, especially if infected with pests or diseases. 3, be sure to wash your hands before taking cuttings. 4, maintain a clean and organized environment. Keep detailed records, as we saw with Linda, of your propagation procedures. And finally, bottom heat information is helpful if propagating during cold temperatures like the wintertime. The thermostat placement should be positioned close to the roots. We hope you decide to explore the many ways your garden can prosper through plant propagation. Listed above are some other resources that cover seed starting and plant propagation.
We hope that you will find our information informative and helpful. Thanks for watching, and please remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel.